Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
And the Lord said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times, and for the numbering by them the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of the months and the beginning of years, the passing away of the months and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of the seasons." Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening and to fellowship with us in discourse. Of course, many of you are aware that tomorrow, according to the calendar that we established, the ancient Enochian lunar solar calendar, is the Feast of Trumpets. That tomorrow night, the first sliver of the waxing crescent moon, when it reaches near 7% full, will become first visible sometime after sunset. And that it is 2 days later, on the September 23rd, that we have the Revelation 12 sign occurring, which has been encoded into the scriptures for thousands of years. And this is the virgin clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, child within her womb, and a crown of 12 stars, which includes the 9-star constellation of Leo and the 3 planets, Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And so this particular sign, it will be the first time that it has occurred in this alignment since who knows how far back people have gone using stellarium or starry night or other astronomy programs, have gone back thousands of years in advance and thousands of years forward, and have only found this particular day as connected to that particular alignment as stated and revealed in Revelation 12, chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. There was an alignment that was similar to this that occurred on September 11th, 3 BC, when Christ is said to have been born, but that involved different planets as far as the 9-star constellation of Leo, and then also that it wasn't, I believe it wasn't Mars, but some other 3 other different planets that aligned with that, and that the moon and the sun were slightly different with regard to that specific alignment. And so there is similarities. And so this evening I wanted to speak about a few things that I wrote about when Nisan, the spring feast, first occurred. This was on the 13th of Nisan. I wrote an article on Facebook and posted it called "Behold the Lamb." And it was basically talking about how Yeshua's birth, that his first incarnation and coming into flesh form, that he fulfilled the first three spring feast and also the summer feast, Pentecost, that as it occurred during Moses' time when he led the Israelites out of the bondage of Egypt, that during Passover they were instructed to slaughter a lamb without spot or blemish, and then to make the sign of the tav, the Hebrew letter tav, which is similar to that of a cross, to place that on the doorpost, and then the death angel, which would come in that evening at midnight, that the Israelites, because of the blood of the Lamb, would be protected. But those that did not have the mark of protection, all of them would suffer the death of their firstborn, which is what occurred. And so it was not just the animals or the Egyptians, but all of the firstborn of Egypt that was not protected suffered the death of their firstborn. And so this is what occurred. And so it was celebrated from then on as a memorial. It was mandated by the Most High God that this would be one of these 7 holy days, which, they call it holidays now, but the 7 original holy days mandated for Israel to recognize and celebrate forever as a memorial for what occurred and how they were freed and how they were protected. And so the Most High gave them as feast days and festivals, the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which began on the 15th of Nisan, Passover on the 14th of Nisan. The 15th, always according to the lunar calendar, is a full moon Sabbath. And then on the 16th, you have the Festival of First Fruits beginning. And it would be celebrated until the 22nd, which was a Sabbath as well. And so it began on the Sabbath on the 15th and ended on the Sabbath on the 22nd. And then you have 7 perfect weeks. And then on the 50th day, in similarity to the whole cycle of Jubilee, you have the celebration of Shavuot, which is Pentecost. And that was fulfilled when Israel, being freed from Egypt and led to Mount Sinai, they were given the law. And they met the Most High face to face. Yahweh Elohim, I am that I am. Behold the hand, behold the nail. And so they met their God face to face and also received the Torah and the 10 Commandments. And how this was fulfilled during the time of Christ is that it was after his resurrection that the Holy Spirit was sent to the apostles and filling them with tongues, with the gift of tongues. When they spake, all those that were around, no matter where they were from, they heard them and understood them in their own native tongue. And so that was when the Great Commission to go forth and to preach the gospel unto the ends of the world was given to the apostles. And I just released a 3-book set called The Great Commission, books 1, 2, and 3. And the first 2 are the Acts and the Gospels of the apostles as they were sent forth 2 by 2 out into the world, and the things that they encountered with regard to the pagan nations and the persecutions, Stephen being the first martyr, but most of them underwent martyrdom, but they also converted many people, so that Christianity now is one of the predominant faiths of the world. And so in the third book of this particular set, it's all of the apocalypses, which have to do with the end of days, the last times, our being the fig tree generation. Which is interesting, because if you look at when Abraham was born, it was in 1948, before Christ, 1,948 years before Christ, which is interesting also because it aligns with the blooming of the fig tree, which is one of the signs that was given to the apostles with regard to what the end of days would be like, when all of the apostles asked Christ to reveal to them what would be the signs of the end and of your return. He told them in Matthew 24, in Luke 21, and Mark 13, to know ye the parable of the fig tree. And we'll cover this in a little bit more elaboration later in the show, but I want to bring forth some information that I don't think a lot of people are aware of with regard to some of the signs that were seen in the skies, and that this occurred, that there was significant signs seen also on the day that Adam and Eve ate fruit from the tree of the knowledge good and evil, and being cast out of paradise, that there was significant sign in the heavens during that time, and that there was also, when Cain killed Abel, similarity. There was signs seen within the heavens and in the earth. And then on the day that Abraham was born, and then of course when Yahushuah was born into world, and also when he died and passed away. So I'm going to share all of this because no matter what occurs on September 23rd, I know a lot of people are teaching that this is when the rapture of the church will occur. But in my opinion, there's still the unveiling of the Antichrist and the establishment of the beast system to be established and put into place before the protection of the church on what is cited in Scripture as occurring on the last day, the catching away, the gathering of the church, the preparation of the bride awaiting the bridegroom. And so I'm not one of those that ascribes to pre-trib, to the pre-tribulation rapture, and I don't believe, and I would love to be wrong on this, because I'm certainly, as I know many of you are, ready to go home, and I wouldn't mind at all, leaving the insanity of what the world is, in my opinion, on the precipice of going through. And so, I'd love to be wrong. It would, overjoy me to be so. But again, in my opinion, it's clear in Scripture that the Antichrist comes and is revealed first before Christ comes on the last trump, on the last day, and then the wrath of God being poured out on the wicked, those not written into the book of life. And so I'm going to share with you some interesting texts that, again, not a lot of people have heard about, I don't believe. And I'm going to show to you, I'm going to elaborate on these particular signs as they occurred over the occurrences of those things which I made mention and talked about. And so I'm going to begin first with an article that I wrote, the Behold the Lamb, which you can find on my Facebook page under the notes that I released. The most recent note that I just released is on the third book of the Great Commission, the Apocalypses, which I'll make mention of some of that this evening as well. But I'm going to read a little bit from that article to set the premise for what I want to share this evening with regard to the signs in the heavens and on the earth and how they are significant, and that what we had seen with the total eclipse, that traditionally the ancient peoples believed that an eclipse portended doom or judgment. And since the time of the eclipse on August 21st, which interestingly enough was 40 days out from the Day of Atonement, that we have seen judgment, that hurricanes Harvey and Irma have come in and devastated much of Texas and the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, other Caribbean islands, and also Florida, that the devastation runs into the billions, and that many people had their livelihoods and their lives and their entire routine, everything that they knew, completely transformed, and that they are forcefully being put through just remarkable change. And so I do pray for all of those individuals. All right, so I'm going to read. Passover represents the core of who we are as covenant believers, knowledgeable of the ancient promise of the redeeming Son's coming as dictated to and foreshadowed by Moses 500 years prior. It is our birthright as the sons of God to know him as King and Lord. Long ago, the angel of death on this night looked for the blood of a lamb as a doorpost sign of protection before striking down the firstborn of Egypt, both human and animal, in same eviscerating moment of annihilation. This action freed Yahweh's people from 400 years of bondage and servitude under the Egyptians. Sunset and the close of unleavened bread, the full moon rising to light the Israelites' escape from Egypt, crossing over the Reed Sea on dry ground. The Most High cleaving asunder the waves, blocking their withdrawal. Pursued by Pharaoh's army, Yahweh levied in one crushing tidal condemnation, a wave for those chasing and destroying in single moment all of Satan's plan to establish his children as rulers of the ancient world. A half a millennia later, the light of salvation was born through a virgin mother. Overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, the Son entered flesh of his own accord, assuming the perfect body for fulfilling a lifetime of prophetic utterance. Even the sun, moon, stars, and planets interpreted his coming, the Mazzaroth spinning tail of immaculate conception, and stomp upon the dragon's skull. Mighty wonders followed his works, and even the criminals believed, recognizing the awesome signs accompanying the 3 hours of darkness spread across Jerusalem and world. The celestial luminaries shone in brilliance. Behold, the Lamb of God who dieth for the sins of the world. Many prophets, scribes, keepers of secrets, tracked the Bethlehem star signifying the birth of the Lion of Judah, who would later return as Melchizedek, priest and king. A momentous resurrection overthrew death, linked to the serpent's original temptation. 2,000 years earlier, the same star was witnessed during the birth of Abraham, the patriarch of the Hebrew people. As Herod was warned that Yahushuah would destroy his kingship, so was Nimrod told in similarity, apocalyptic warning of Abraham's coming. 2,000 years before that, this same star shined brightly the first night that Adam and Eve spent alone together as exiles cast from paradise to their new earthly home. Will this prophetic sign also accompany Revelation 12's the virgin clothed in the sun, the child within her womb, and the moon beneath her feet, and a crown of 12 stars? Encoded scripturally thousands of years in advance of this year's unfolding Feast of Trumpets, will it mark the beginning of the 50th and final Jubilee? 120 Jubilees times 50 years equals the 6,000 years preceding what is said to be the final 1,000 years of the millennial reign. Mission completed, expiring on the cross, Yahushuah in first coming fulfilled 4 of the 7 Levitical 23 feasts mandated by the Father, prophetically affirming Christ as Son and only begotten. His second advent will fulfill the other 3. My question is, when does the Antichrist, the Mahdi, come forward in revealing, confirming the script, as we all know that he must come first? Let him with ears to hear, hear. Zen Garcia, the 13th of Nisan. The first month of the year 6000. And so I'm going to share the sign that Adam saw and spoke about from a book called The Secret Book of Moses. It's called the Asatir, A-S-A-T-I-R, which we're working on producing and will be releasing very shortly. In it, it says this: "And on the day when Abel sacrificed twice, 3 times, God turned favorably to Abel and to his offering. But he did not turn favorably to Cain and to his offering. When he perceived from the first the turning, that to him he did not turn, then Cain was wroth, and he returned to his land. And he tarried 4 years without seeing Adam or Abel. And Eve loved Cain, but Adam loved Abel. And when Eve saw that her son Cain did not come to her, she longed for him, and she took permission from Adam and went to see him alone. When Abel saw her rising up and going alone, and that the place whither she was going was distant, then he got up quickly and went with her. And she found Cain gone from that place where he was dwelling at the beginning to a place which was afterwards called Araphat. When Cain saw his brother Abel, he thought in his heart to kill him. But the Lord, blessed be he, before whom nothing can be hidden, and who exalted be he, knows the evil inclinations of the hearts of his creatures, said unto him, Surely if thou wilt kill Abel, there will be requital for it. The meaning of surely is that there will be requital for the blood. And unto Cain, and an avenging of it from him. See what is written in the book of Genesis, chapter 4, verse 6. And God said unto Cain, why art thou wroth, and why did thy face fall? If thou art good, thou shalt be accepted, and if thou art not good, then at the gate the sin is crouching, and thou shalt rule over it. The explanation of this is as follows. Behold, this thing is in thy hand, as thou wishest, good or evil. And nothing is mentioned in the Bible of what happened except that Cain said to his brother Abel, Rise, O my brother, let us go into the field. And both went together, and it was as they were in the field that Cain rose up against his brother Abel and slew him. And when he had slain him and shed his blood, his spirit was distressed, and the earth cried out and would not receive the blood of Abel to drink it until commanded by God. And the earth trembled, and the light of the sun and of the moon was darkened at the time when Cain slew Abel. Now Adam dwelt in Badon, and when Adam saw what had happened in the world, the darkening of the sun and the moon, and the trembling of the earth, then he was greatly frightened on that day. And that day was for him like unto the day when he and his wife ate of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden. And Adam went up from Badon to Siphrah, and that is Sichem, to see the book of the wars of the Lord, the stars. And he saw the rising of the days, so that he should understand what had happened in the world. And he saw the planets, the horoscope of the days, and 7 were fighting one another. And he saw that of his 2 sons, only one was still on the earth. One was slain, and the other had fallen through his own sin, which had seized him. And then Adam understood that this was the cause, and he returned to Badon. And from the day of the creation of Adam until the day Cain killed Abel, there were 30 years. And the slaying of Abel happened on the 16th day of the month of Tebet. God created Adam on the 6th day and on the 6th hour, and Adam and his wife dwelt in the garden 8 days, and he did not know his wife Eve to lie with her in the garden, and their knowledge was changed through the serpent, through the speech of the serpent, and they were driven out of the garden in the same hour at which Adam had been created. He went out from the garden in that selfsame hour. And after Cain had slain Abel and Cain had been driven away, Adam learned of his sin, and no seed remained to him for his inheritance, to be his successor, to inherit the command of God. So you see here from this particular passage, and no seed remained to him for his inheritance, that when Cain killed Abel, Abel was his son and not Cain. And so after Cain killed Abel, he had no person to inherit until Seth was born. Then Adam sought repentance and separated himself from his wife for 100 years and did not know her during this time until God received his repentance. And after that, Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Seth, the master of the settlement of the world. And he saw the image lighting up his face, and from this Adam knew that this was the mystery of the chain. And in proof of this, see what the Lord, may he be exalted, said in the book of Genesis, chapter 5, verse 3. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness and after his image, and called his name Seth, which means replacement, compensation. Oh, we didn't have a break. All right, we'll just continue. Note the significance that it is not said at the time of the birth of Cain, in his likeness, and this image is the luminous image of Moses. Peace of God be upon him, which was transmitted from man to man. All right, and so you see, and I'm going to explain a little bit further about this sign. that it says that when Cain killed Abel, that he saw, and that day was for him like unto the day when he and his wife ate of the fruit of the tree which in the midst of the garden. And so the same signs occurred on the day that they were cast out, that the signs in the heavens and in the earth, and earthquakes, and the shaking, that these signs were seen and recognized by the world. And I'll give you just a little bit of elaboration on that. It says that all the living things groaned. It is said that the world was shaken and the creatures were frightened, and the mountains and the plains all trembled, and the light of the sun and the moon were darkened, and Adam was sorely frightened, as on the day when he ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This description of the upheaval of nature is not mentioned anywhere in connection with the murder of Abel. But Adam, he saw in the book of the wars the horoscope of the day, and adds, one was no longer upon the earth. So he saw that this was written in, which again, not a lot of people know, but that Adam was given 5 books called the books of creation when he was cast out of paradise. And that it was these books which he passed on to Seth and then later to Enoch, and Enoch passed these on to Noah. And that Noah then passed them on to Shem. Shem passed them on to his children, and they eventually came to Abraham and to Jacob, Israel. All right, continuing. It says, and when Enoch grew up and when the days of his life had reached 13 years, he began to learn in the book of the signs which had been given to Adam. And this book was copied on 24 precious stones. I'll read one other passage about these particular books. It says, and when Enoch grew up, oh wait, that's the wrong passage. For 7 years Noah learned in the books of creation, the book of signs, and the book of astrology, and the book of the wars of the Lord. These are the book of the generations of Adam. That's also from the Assatir, the book of the secrets of Moses. Chapter 2, verse 7, and also chapter 3, verse 9. Okay, let me check the chat room just to make sure. It doesn't seem like we're going to a break for whatever reason, but we'll continue on. And if anything is weird, just give me a shout out in the chat room. All right, now I'm going to read a little bit about the signs that were seen in the heavens when Abraham was born, and that in similarity to as when Christ was born, and also to the signs that we're seeing now, that there were signs in the heavens that were recognized by the Magi and the wise men of Babylon during Nimrod's time. In the book of Jasher in chapter 8, it says, and it was in the night that Abram was born that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes towards heaven in that night to look at the stars, and they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight. And the sages understood this matter, and they knew its import. And they said to each other, "This only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands." And the wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, "Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, 'Why have you concealed this matter from me?' And then we shall suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear." And they did so, and they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, "May the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the princes of thy host. And we yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank, and rejoiced with him that night. And when thy servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And thy servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and were greatly terrified, and we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful, and kill all the kings of the earth, and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever. And now, our Lord and King, behold, we have made truly acquainted thee with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seems good to the king to give us his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through his evil." And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he called for Terah, and Terah came before the king. And the king said to Terah, "I have been told that a son was yesternight born to thee, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now, therefore, give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us, and I will give thee for his value thy house full of silver and gold." And Terah answered the king and said to him, "My lord and king, I have heard thy words, and thy servant shall do all that his king desireth. But my lord and king, I will tell thee what happened to me yesternight, that I may see what advice the king will give his servant. Then I will answer the king upon what he has just spoken." And the king said, "Speak." And Terah said to the king, "Ayon, son of Mored, came to me yesternight, saying, 'Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave thee, and I will give thee silver and gold and straw and provender for its value.' And I said to him, 'Wait till I see the king concerning thy words, and behold, whatever the king saith, that will I do. And now, my lord the king, behold, I have made first thing known to thee, and the advice which my king will give unto this servant, that will I follow.' And the king heard the words of Terah, and his anger was kindled, and he considered him in the light of a fool. And the king answered Terah, and he said to him, 'Art thou so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding, to do this thing, to give thy beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even for straw and provender? Art thou so short of silver and gold that thou shouldst do this thing, because thou canst not obtain straw and provender to feed thy horse? And what is silver and gold to thee, or straw and provender, that thou shouldst give away that fine horse which I gave thee, like which there is none to be had on the whole earth? And the king left off speaking, and Terah answered the king, saying, Like unto this has the king spoken to his servant. I beseech thee, my lord and king, what is this which thou didst say unto me, saying, Give thy son, that we may slay him, and I will give thee silver and gold for his value? What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Surely then at my death the silver and gold will return to my king who gave it. And when the king heard the words of Terah and the parable which he brought concerning the king, it grieved him greatly, and he was vexed at this thing, and his anger burned with him. And Terah saw that the anger of the king was kindled against him. And he answered the king, saying, All that I have is in the king's power. Whatever the king desireth to do to his servant, that let him do. Yea, even my son, he is in the king's power. Without value in exchange, he and his 2 brothers that are older than he. And the king said to Terah, No, but I will purchase thy younger son for a price. And Terah answered the king, saying, I beseech thee, my lord and king, to let thy servant speak a word before thee, and let the king hear the word of his servant. And Terah said, Let my king give me 3 days' time, till I consider this matter within myself and consult with my family concerning the words of my king. And he pressed the king greatly to agree to this. And the king hearkened to Terah, and he did so, and he gave him 3 days. And Terah went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family and spoke to them all the words of the king, and the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Terah, saying, Send me thy son for a price, as I spoke to thee, and shouldst thou not do this, I will send and slay all thou hast in thy house, so that thou shalt not even have a dog remaining. And Terah hastened, as the thing was urgent from the king. And he took a child from one of his servants, which his handmaid had borne to him that day. And Terah brought the child to the king and received value for him. And the Lord was with Terah in this matter, that Nimrod might not cause Abram's death. And the king took the child from Terah, and with all his might dashed his head to the ground, for he thought it had been Abram. And this was concealed from him from that day. And it was forgotten by the king, as it was the will of providence not to suffer Abram's death. And Terah took Abram his son secretly, together with his mother and nurse, and he concealed them in a cave. And he brought them their provisions monthly. And the Lord was with Abram in the cave, and he grew up, and Abram was in the cave 10 years. And the king and his princes, his soothsayers and sages, thought that the king had killed Abram. All right, this is the second witness. And what I'm going to speak about now is how the Most High, even before Israel was freed from the bondage of Egypt, that Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the unleavened bread, and also the 1st of Tishri and the 15th of Tishri, these were very important dates for the Most High God, and that he had established them even in Abraham's time as being special dates. And that he also he had set certain particular events and established them on those particular days previously. And so, but just to give you a second witness as to Abram, the sign being seen on when Abraham was born, it says this. And this is from a book called I'll tell you in just a minute. I think it's like the untold stories of the prophets and patriarchs, something of that nature. Next morning, the king sent for his soothsayers to explain the dream, and this was their interpretation. Hear, O king, this dream presages to thee great misfortune, which Abraham and his posterity shall bring upon thee. The time will come when he will war with his forces against thee, and thy forces, and will overcome them, and put them to the sword. Thou alone will escape with 3 of thy confederates. But a messenger of Abram will cause thy death. Therefore, O king, remember that thy counsel of wise men foretold this 52 years ago in the stars at Abraham's birth. As long as Abraham lives, thou art in danger. All right, now to give you some particular events that happened on the 15th of Nisan. First, Abraham was called by the Most High God and told that his seed would be given the land and that he would be multiplied as the stars. And it was also on the 15th of Nisan that Isaac was born and that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. And I'll affirm this from this particular book here. For 15 years he had dwelt in Canaan, and Abraham was now aged 70. When on the 15th day of the first month of Nisan, on the selfsame day on which in after years the children of Israel went out of Egypt, the voice of God came to him, saying, I am the Lord that brought thee out of the furnace of Chaldee. To thee will I give this land to inherit it. And he said, quote, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? Shall my descendants be faithful and true and serve thee, the living God, or will they rebel against God, against thee, as did the men before the flood, and as did the men of Shinar, who built the tower? Then God bade him take an heifer of 3 years old, a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon, and he took all these and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. And God said to him, when in after days thy descendants shall build me a temple, in it shall these 5 kinds of victims be offered to me. But said Abraham, should the temple be destroyed, what then? What shall they do? Then answered the Most Holy, then shall offer to me in spirit, and I will pardon their sins. The beasts and the birds also signify the races over which his seed was to reign. The beasts he divided, and they betokened the Gentile races, from which they were to purge away their idolatry. But the birds he divided not, for the birds signified the elect nation. Then came ravens and vultures down upon the carcasses. But Abraham drove them away, a symbol of the protection which God would accord to the people for his promise sake, and the sake of their father Abraham, when the powers of evil or mighty princesses menaced them, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and he saw the 4 realms, the horror of awakening, Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Syrio-Grecian, and the Roman Empire. And God said to Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But in the 4th generation thy seed shall come hither again, after I have plagued the nation that has held them in bondage with 250 plagues. Is this decree spoken to punish me for my crimes? Asked Abraham. No, answered the Almighty. Thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. And Terah, who now bewails his former idolatry, has a share in the eternal happiness. Also Ishmael, thy son, who shall be born to thee, will in thy lifetime repent and return to good, and the profanity of thy grandson Esau shalt thou not see. And when the sun was set, it was dark, and the various periods of futurity passed before the eyes of the seer. He beheld a smoking furnace. This was the flaming Gehenna, hell, where sinners shall expiate their iniquities. Then he saw a burning lamp. That was the law given on Sinai, and it passed between those pieces. That is, he saw Israel go through the Red Sea. Then said the voice of God to the patriarch, I have showed thee the temple, the worship, law, bondage, and hell. I must tell thee that in the times to come, through the sins of thy children, the temple will be destroyed, and the law will be disregarded. And so you can see, even from this story, that Abraham, just as it is taught and spoken about in the testament of the 12 patriarchs, that even the 12 patriarchs of the children of Jacob, they knew that they would fall away into transgression. They knew that Christ would be born of their bloodline, and that Judah would own the kingship, and that Levi would own the priesthood, and that it would be through them that the line of kings, David and Solomon, and also the priests through Levi would be born. Which is, again, why it's prophetic and shared in the testament of Abraham, the testament of Isaac, the testament of Jacob, and the testament of the 12 patriarchs as to what would occur to them later. All right, just two more affirmations on the 15th of Nisan. It was the night of the 15th of Nisan, the selfsame night in which in after years the firstborn of Egypt would be slain, and Abraham's heart fainted as he overtook the mighty host, and saw that they were countless as the sands of the seashore, and as grasshoppers for number. This is talking about when Lot, Abraham's nephew, was taken by the kings, the Nephilim kings, Shaladamer and Og, and the other Nimrod and the others that decide that we're going to go and war against him. Those are the giant tribes, the giant clans, that even when Moses freed the Israelites and Joshua took them into the promised land, that they had to war against the Amalekites, the Anakim, the children of the giants that were born of the Genesis 6. All right, welcome back, everybody. I was speaking about the connections with the 15th of Nisan and also with the signs in the heavens and the earth to that of Adam when he was banished and cast out of paradise, when Abel was murdered by Cain, and also when Abraham was called to leave Ur and to not bow down to idols, and that also, as you will see, that Isaac was born on the 15th of Nisan as well. And it's interesting because I found a passage in this particular text that I'm speaking about the forgotten legends of the patriarchs and prophets. It specifically mentions in there that Yahushuah would return on the Feast of Trumpets as well, which I had already written about that and shared that in my Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, where I broke down and spoke about all of the Levitical 23 feast days and festivals and how they align with the first and second Advent. And so, I had already speculated as such, but to find this particular passage, which I'm going to share with you here in just a few minutes, written in this particular ancient text of these ancient legends, was absolutely confirming witness to me that um, the postulation I had brought forth in that book was correct. Which again, for those, as far as the Revelation 12 sign, it, in my opinion, doesn't actually occur on the Feast of Trumpets. And so that to me is also an indicator that, this is not the return of Christ and the rapture of the church, as so many people have been teaching and are speculating, which again, I would love to be wrong on this. I would be just really overjoyed and delighted to be wrong on this, as I'm sure many of you are, as ready as I am to be with the Lord. But as long as we are here and for the time that we remain, we must do what we can with each day in servicing the kingdom and awakening to people to remembrance, helping them to remember who they are, why they are here, what all of this is about. And also, as Christ said, remember from whence thou art fallen, and how the fall ties into our incarnation into flesh form. The war in heaven, its connections to the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, as I elaborate in the trilogy on the great contest. All of that is contained therein as well. All right, but continuing. Going to tie the 15th of Nisan with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah as well. It says this: at noon on the 15th of Nisan, the third day after the circumcision of Abraham, as recorded in the book of Genesis, the heat of the sun was so great that Gehenna, hell, was penetrated by it, and Abraham had not recovered the administration of the rite which had been performed by the hands of Shem, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, which, if you don't know, Shem is also called Melchizedek in some of the texts as well. And so it was on the 15th of Nisan that the angels visit Abraham and tell him that Sarah would give birth to a child, that Isaac was to be born of him, and that it would be through Isaac that his seed would be born, the promised seed, that Ishmael and his children are counted with the seed of the serpent. And then it was also, as I will bring forth here in a short bit, that it was on the month of Tishri, on the 1st of Tishri, that Sarah brought forth, was told that she was going to conceive Isaac, and conceiving him on the 1st of Tishri, that he was born on the 15th of Nisan, as we'll go into now. It says this: And this is that quote that I told you that specifically mentions the first day of Tishri as being the day on which the Lord would return. It says this: Now it was the first day of the 7th month of Tishri, the day on which, at the close of the world's history, the Lord will come to judge the quick and the dead. That the Lord God remembered Sarah and the promise he had made, and looked upon her, and she conceived a son in her old age. 1 year and 4 months after her sojourn in Gerar, and 9 months after, say some, but say others, 6 months and 2 days after. At midday, say some, others say in the evening of the 15th of Nisan, or as others affirm, on the 1st of Nisan she was delivered of a son, without suffering any pains in the bringing forth. And the same time that Sarah's womb was blessed, God looked upon many other barren women and blessed them also. And on the day that the child was born, they were delivered likewise. And the blind saw, the dumb spake, the deaf heard, and the lame walked. And the crazed recovered their senses. Also, the sun shone 48 times brighter than he shines at midsummer, even with the splendor that he had on the day of his creation. It's the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets. That's the name of the text. And you can find that particular passage, I believe it is on page 172 for those that might want to quote it and include it in, 179 actually at the very top of the page. Which again, this is the only place in any of the extra biblical texts, in any text anywhere, that it says specifically that on the first of the month of Tishri, which is the Feast of Trumpets, that this would be the day that Christ returns. Now, there's another really interesting passage, and this is also from the Assatir, which speaks about the first month and the first day of the month of Tishri. And this is from, again, the Secret Book of Moses. It says this about Tishri. Tishri, the first month of creation, according to one tradition, according to another, Nisan. Rosh Hashanah, according to one opinion, Eve created a week after Adam. These are notes at the bottom of one of the passages speaking about Tishri and about the creation of Adam. It says, Adam was created in Tishri, was judged, repented, and received back all in Tishri. It actually says that on the first day of the month, Adam was created, on the first day of the month of Tishri. And that, remember, he and Eve were 8 days before they fell. And then, that takes us to the Day of Atonement, which is interesting because it seems like that the fall feasts also align with the creation of Adam and their fall from paradise and their being cast out of paradise and exiled here to the earth. First day of the new year that Adam was created. Now, also, I want you to know that even though Rosh Hashanah is celebrated on the first of Tishri as a civil new year in Israel, it has been moved. In Exodus, it was moved to the month of Abib, which is Hebrew for green ears. It also is connected to the month of Nisan. So it is Nisan now, which is the beginning of the new year. And that actually, according to the the Enochian 64-day solar calendar, it is the vernal equinox, which is the first day of the new lunar year, and that is Rosh Hashanah. On the lunar calendar, on the Enochian lunar calendar, it is the first waxing crescent moon, which is sighted near right after the vernal equinox, the closest one that you can find to it, according also to the barley feast as well. And so there seems to be, again, these connections to Tishri, the Day of Atonement, to the fall of Adam, at which it would make sense to me that it would be on the first of Tishri, Adam being created, and then, says Eve being created a week later, and then they're being tempted and fall, being cast out. They celebrate the first Sabbath, and then they are exiled to the earth on the 8th day. And then after they are exiled, then you have the Day of Atonement. It's interesting that all that aligns to the fall of humanity, and that it would also align with the redemption of humanity, that Christ would come on those same days in order to rectify the fall, to redeem humanity. And so I thought all of these connections were very interesting. But I want to share with you what occurred, because as I said, that just as there was these signs seen in the heavens when Abel was murdered by Cain, that the same signs were also seen in the heavens when Christ was crucified by the Jews, by the Pharisees, the synagogue of Satan, those that say they are Jews but are not. It says this, and this is from a report from Pilate to Caesar Tiberius, I believe it is. He said, "And when he had been crucified, there was darkness over the whole earth, and the sun, having been completely hidden, and the heaven appearing dark, though it was day, so that the stars appeared, but had at the same time their brightness darkened, as I suppose your reverence is not ignorant of, because in all the world they lighted lamps from the 6th hour until evening. And the moon, being like blood, did not shine the whole night. And yet she happened to be at full." And so again, you can see that the 15th of Nisan, when he was killed, because he was the Passover lamb, and on near the 14th, that would be when the moon was full, because it is on the 15th that you have the full moon Sabbath celebrated. And so again, it shows you that they were following a lunar calendar. And the stars also, and I'm not talking about the Romans, because we know that they were following a pagan solar calendar. But as far as the Jews, celebrating Passover and also the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that it would make sense that it was on the 14th and the 15th of Nisan, when these things occurred to Christ, that the moon would be full, because that's when the full moon Sabbath was celebrated, was on the 15th of Nisan. And the stars also and Orion made a lament about the Jews on account of the wickedness that had been done by them. And on the first of the week, about the 3rd hour of the night, the sun was seen such as it had never at any time shone, and all the heaven was lighted up. And as lightnings come on in winter, so majestic men of indescribable splendor of dress and of glory appeared in the air. and an innumerable multitude of angels crying out and saying, Glory in the highest to God, and on earth peace among men, goodwill. Come up out of Hades, ye who have been kept in slavery in the underground regions of Hades. And at their voice all the mountains and hills were shaken, and the rocks were burst asunder, and great chasms were made in the earth, so that also what was in the abyss appeared, and there were seen in that terror dead men raised up. As the Jews that saw them said, We have seen Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the 12 patriarchs that died 2,500 years ago, and we have seen Noah manifestly in the body. And all the multitude walked about and sang praises to God with a loud voice, saying, The Lord our God that has risen from the dead has brought to life all the dead and has plundered Hades and put him to death. All that night, therefore, my Lord, O King, the light ceased not. And many of the Jews died and were engulfed and swallowed up in the chasms in that night, so that not even their bodies appeared. Those, I say, of the Jews suffered that had spoken against Jesus, and one synagogue was left in Jerusalem, since all those synagogues that had been against Jesus were engulfed. From that fear, then being in perplexity and seized with much trembling, at that same hour I ordered what had been done by them all to be written, and I have reported it to thy mightiness. So remember, as I read and as I release in the second book of the Great Commission, it opens with the Gospel of Nicodemus and the Gospel of Bartholomew, both of whom speak about Christ's descent into hell and how the dead were, when he ascended, when he was resurrected, many of the dead were resurrected with him. And that Adam, even Adam and all the other patriarchs which had died before the coming of Christ, even to the one thief that was on the cross, they were all resurrected with Christ and taken into paradise with him. They were delivered over to the Most High God, to the Father, as the resurrected first fruits. That Christ, when he resurrected on the 17th, right before sunset, the 17th of Nisan, that he was the high priest, which would perform the barley offering as associated to the festival of unleavened bread, that the barley sheaf was waved as an offering for the sins of Israel, and that they, being resurrected, were baptized in the Arturian lake by the archangel Michael, and then allowed to enter into New Jerusalem, where they had been living since, and that they are living with the Most High God in paradise, which is at the third heaven, as Paul stated, and that this is the place from which Adam and Eve originally were tempted and fell. That our former estate is in paradise, and that we also, as the sons of God, as the angelic hierarchy, part of the angelic hierarchy in our former being, that we were there before entering into flesh form. And when we get to the last segment, which I guess I'm going to have to go into very soon, I'm going to read from the book of Enoch, speaking about this particular day. And in this particular text, it speaks about us being like the angels. And that's because at the last trump, at the last day, when the elect are caught up to be with the Lord, only for a short time, because we're not going back into paradise. Actually, paradise, New Jerusalem, will descend here to the earth. That it will be here on the earth that the millennial reign will occur. And that 1,000 years where I pray that all of us are fortunate and that we are counted with those that are numbered among the elect to inherit New Jerusalem, paradise, and to be allowed to reign with him for that 1,000 years, that it will be here on the earth, that the earth and the heavens will be destroyed and refashioned anew in preparation for the return of the bridegroom. And I cover this in a show called The Stars Come Crashing to the Earth. You can find it on YouTube. Just look up Endeavor Freedom, Stars Crashing to the Earth. And I explain the timeline of how the feasts will be fulfilled, how Christ will return again on the Feast of Trumpets, that with the seventh trump, the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our Lord. And I go into this in great detail in my book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. I explain the feasts of the Most High God, the Levitical feasts, and how they align with Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles, which, for those that don't recognize, in Hebrew is Pesach, Shag Hamotzi, Yom Habakurim, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Tabernacles. All right, so I'm going to read, I don't think we're going to go to break because it didn't happen last time, but if we do, I'll stop. But I'm going to go ahead and go into the passage from Enoch to show you how this aligns with the last day, the last trump, and that it will be on the Yom Teruah, the first of Tishri, in some year. I don't know when. Even though this is the 6,000th year, in my opinion, that this is the 120th Jubilee. When Christ comes again, I do believe it'll be soon. But will it be September 23rd? I hope so. But I don't believe so. But I hope so. All right. Enoch on that day. It says this. In that day, the prayer of the holy and the righteous and the blood of the righteous shall ascend from the earth into the presence of the Lord of spirits. In that day shall the holy ones assemble who dwell above the heavens. See, this is also mentioning, because the resurrected first fruits, that when Christ took Adam and the other patriarchs up into paradise, that's where they have been dwelling since. And this is what Enoch is talking about right here. In that day shall the holy ones assemble who dwell above the heavens, and with united voice petition, supplicate, praise, laud, and bless the name of the Lord of spirits, on account of the blood of the righteous which has been shed, that the prayer of the righteous may not be intermitted before the Lord of spirits, that for them he would execute judgment, and that his patience may not endure forever. At that time I beheld the Ancient of Days, while he sat upon the throne of his glory, while the book of the living was opened in his presence. Remember in Revelation, the books of life are opened before the Lamb. The book of the living was opened in his presence, and while all the powers which were above the heavens stood around and before him, then were the hearts of the saints full of joy, because the consummation of righteousness was arrived. The supplication of the saints heard, and the blood of the righteous approached by the Lord of spirits. In that place I beheld a fountain of righteousness which never failed, encircled by many springs of wisdom. Of these all the thirsty drank and were filled with wisdom, having their habitation with the righteous, the elect, and the holy. In that hour was this Son of Man invoked before the Lord of Spirits, and his name in the presence of the Ancient of Days. So here, you're speaking about Christ being with the Father even before. I mean, this is the book of Enoch. This is the most ancient text going back to before the flood. And already they're talking about Christ and how he would come and how he would redeem us. Before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of heaven were formed, his name was invoked in the presence of the Lord of Spirits. A support shall he be for the righteous and the holy to lean upon without failing, and he shall be the light of nations. He shall be the hope of those whose hearts are troubled. All who dwell on the earth shall fall down and worship before him. Remember, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that it will be when he returns on the 1st of Tishri, on the Feast of Trumpets. The 7th trump is announced. The elect are caught up and protected from the wrath of God that is going to be poured out on the wicked. And then once the wrath of God is poured out on the wicked, when all the dead are resurrected and everybody is brought before him, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that it is then that the harvest, the separation of the wheat and the tares occurs. And then those that are numbered with the elect shall on the, that will be the, when he takes the judgment seat, the day of atonement, and then the judgment, the harvest, and then the righteous will go in on the Feast of Tabernacles on Sukkot to go into New Jerusalem, to be allowed entrance into paradise for what will be the millennial reign. And that's how what I'm talking about now connects to the second advent. All right, continuing. All who dwell on earth shall fall down and worship before him, shall bless and glorify him, and sing praises to the name of the Lord of Spirits. Therefore the elect and the concealed one existed in his presence before the world was created and forever. And so everything was known, the end from the beginning was known, even before the world was created, before the foundations of this world. Remember in the scriptures it says he knew us before the foundations of the world? Well, how would he know us if we did not exist? In his presence he existed and has revealed to the saints and to the righteous the wisdom of the Lord of Spirits, for he has preserved the lot of the righteous, because they have hated and rejected this world of iniquity, and have detested all its works and ways in the name of the Lord of Spirits. For in his name shall they be preserved, and his will shall be their life. In those days shall the kings of the earth and the mighty men who have gained the world by their achievements, the seed of Cain, those that sit on the thrones of the world. Remember in Isaiah 14, he wants to exalt himself above the stars and the clouds of God to be like the Most High, but he shall be cast down to the sides of the pit. And when he is in the pit, all the kings look upon him and wonder at the beast. And so, all that connects to this as well. For in the day of their anxiety and trouble, their souls shall not be saved, and they shall be in subjection to those whom I have chosen. I will cast them like hay into the fire and like lead into the water. Thus shall they burn in the presence of the righteous and sink in the presence of the holy, nor shall a tenth part of them be found. But in the day of their trouble, the world shall obtain tranquility. In his presence shall they fall and not be raised up again, nor shall there be anyone to take them out of his hands and to lift them up, for they have denied the Lord of Spirits, and his Messiah. See, the Lord of spirits, the Lord of hosts, that is the Father, and his Messiah, the Son. The name of the Lord of spirits shall be blessed. In those days, the saints and the chosen shall undergo a change, the glorified bodies, in the twinkling of an eye. The light of day shall rest upon them, and the splendor and the glory of the saints shall be changed. In the day of trouble, the last day, the last trump, in the day of trouble, evil shall be heaped upon sinners, but the righteous shall triumph in the name of the Lord of spirits. Others shall be made to see that they must repent and forsake the works of their hands, and that glory awaits them not in the presence of the Lord of spirits, yet that by his name they may be saved. The Lord of spirits will have compassion on them, for great is his mercy, and righteousness in his judgment. And in the presence of his glory, not in his judgment, shall iniquity stand. He who repents not before him shall perish. Henceforth I will not have mercy on them, saith the Lord of spirits. In those days shall the earth deliver up from her womb, and hell deliver up from hers that which it has received, and destruction shall restore that which it owes. He shall select the righteous and the holy from among them, for the day of their salvation has approached. And in those days shall the elect one sit upon his throne, while every secret of intellect, wisdom shall proceed from his mouth, for the Lord of spirits has gifted and glorified him. In those days the mountains shall skip like rams, and the hills shall leap like young sheep, satiated with milk, and all the righteous shall become angels in heaven. You see, all the righteous shall become angels in heaven. Remember from whence thou art fallen. We were angels in our former being. And that's what we will return and become again once we are given our glorified bodies. Their countenance shall be bright with joy, for in those days shall the elect one be exalted. The earth shall rejoice, the righteous shall inhabit it, and the elect possess it. And so, again, in my opinion, there's no getting around that we pre-existed and we were with the Father and the Son before incarnating into flesh form. And it's my opinion that even the book of the Secrets of Enoch references this in chapter 49, which interestingly, this that I just read from chapter 49 of the book of Enoch is included in this. And in the book of the Secrets of Enoch, which is second Enoch, it says this in chapter 49. If there is no truth in men, let them swear by the words, yea, yea, or else nay, nay. And I swear to you, yea, yea, that there has been no man in his mother's womb, but that already before, even to each one, there is a place prepared for the repose of that soul, and a measure fixed how much it is intended that a man be tried in this world. Yea, children, deceive not yourselves, for there has been previously prepared a place for every soul of man. And so, in my opinion, again, the last day, the last trump on Tishri, that Christ will come again, and that it will be in the fulfillment of the Levitical feast that all these things take place. I'll read from Revelation to tie it all together. And I saw a great white throne and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. That's Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15. All right, I'm going to read just one other thing. That on the Feast of Tabernacles, we have the return of New Jerusalem. That when we are judged on the Day of Atonement, when every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, that it is New Jerusalem which descends out of the heavens and comes here to the earth, and that it is there that the elect reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Yeshua spoke about this in John 14. He said, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know." And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God." Revelation 21, verses 2 and 3. So you can see that the feast days are connected to, again, the first and the second coming of Christ, and that it will be on the seventh trump, on the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, that Christ returns. And I would just love that to be tomorrow, because that's when the Feast of Trumpets is tomorrow. Tonight is the day and the hour that no man knoweth, because it is on the lunar conjunctive moon, the phase which follows the sun, that because of the brightness of the sun and because the moon is moving with it, that we cannot see her in this phase. And so we do not know where she's at. But it is when she separates herself from the sun, and the sun descending, she makes her first appearance as a waxing crescent, that this is Rosh Chodesh, the first of Tishri, which should happen tomorrow night. Tomorrow night in the western skies, you should be able to go out after sunset, look towards the western skies, and as the night is transforming to purple, perhaps Venus will be out in her shining. And then the transition into darkness and night, and her purple legions and the pastel colors of twilight fading. Then the first sliver of the moon should be sighted. And this is when the shofar is blown. Traditionally, historically in Israel, the two witnesses will report to the high priest that this is the day that no man knoweth, the hour that no man knoweth. And then when the first sliver of the moon is sighted, they would announce it to the high priest. as confirming witness. And then the shofars were blown all throughout the land of Israel, announcing that the new moon had been seen. And the waxing crescent had been seen. And then all of Israel would run for the temple for the new moon festivities. And they would celebrate the coming of the new month. And then you'd have, 6 days thereafter. And then on the seventh day, the first Sabbath, according to the first quarter moon, on the 15th of Tishri, on the Sukkot, you would have the full moon, and for 7 days they would celebrate the festival of weeks, of Shavuot, of Sukkot, and for 7 days to the next Sabbath, the third quarter moon, they would live in what were the temporary gatherings, these temporary tent-like, yurt-like, dome-like structures, which the Israelites used during the 40 years of wandering through through the desert, and being led to the promised land and being given the law. That for that time, the Israelites utilized such structure. And so Sukkot is a memorial of their being freed from the bondage of Egypt, being given the law, and also being taken and given the promised land, as was promised to Abraham long ago on the 15th of Nisan. I mean, how amazing is that? That all of these dates and all of these festivals, they all tie together and connect, going back thousands of years. And that for all of it to play out in the way that it did, and how we see it unfolding even now in our day and age as being the final generation, that all these things are aligned even to occur in our lifetime. That Christ said, that generation which saw the blooming of the fig tree, which was the regathering of the nation state of Israel, which occurred in 1948, May 14th, 1948, that we would be the generation that sees the second coming, the fulfillment of all the prophecies. That 1/3 of the prophecies contained within the scriptures are written for our generation. That Enoch called us that remote, distant, far distant generation. And that it would be during our lifetimes that all the prophets wanted to see the times that we're living in now. And so these are amazing times. And what do I expect? What am I looking for on the horizon? In my opinion, we're in that moment of peace come sudden destruction. And that's what I'm waiting. And I don't, again, I want to be proven wrong. I do not want destruction to come to the earth or to the people. I don't want anybody to have to suffer, any child to have to suffer war, or to go through turmoil, uncertainty, or to be witness to and experience evil. I pray it all can be delayed, and I pray that the Most High watch over, keep us all safe, no matter what. And I hope, that we don't have to go through the economic destruction, turmoil, destruction of the financial system, a third world war as established by the vision of Albert Pike, and as is being planned, orchestrated, and prepared for by the New World Order and all those secret societies and the Masonic brotherhoods and fraternities and sisterhoods working in tangent together to bring this order out of chaos. I pray we can avoid all of that, that we can just enjoy these days of peace and comfort, and that we don't have to suffer or see the turmoil of all those things that are planned and that are spoken of prophetically. But I know that at some point that things are going to get crazy. And so we do the best we can to prepare for those times. But thank God, you know, praise the Most High, all honor, all glory to the Father and to the Son for this day of joy and our being able to come together in fellowship in the manner that we're doing, my being able to share those things that I've learned and have studied from. Oh, and then one other thing, where it says in the story of Pilate, where he was talking about how even the Jews, they said that they had seen the sign of Abraham, Abraham and the other patriarchs resurrected. In one of the books that I was writing about in the Great Commission, it talks about how they, when Christ said, before Abraham was, I was, and they were, they basically chastised him and wanted to stone him then for saying that. Well, in the story, he sends the angels to resurrect Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he brings them forth as witness to the Pharisees that he is indeed God and that he has the power of life and death and that he can resurrect whom he wishes. And even then, they would not believe. And being hard hearted and stubborn, they still conspired against him. I mean, they were most certainly led by the devil. And they are servants. That being his children, they were his servants. And it's so sad to me that some people would go to such extent to deny truth in order to hold on to what they choose to believe, uh, what they want to believe. And the world, Christ said, and the scriptures state that um, because they have no love of the truth, that he would send them strong delusion. And that's where we are. You see deception all around us, that everybody is led astray and fallen into idolatry. They're following a false calendar, a false cosmology, false feast days and festivals, and celebrating pagan traditions and holidays um, and doing those things which were mandated for us not to do and not to be involved in. But this is all part of Revelation 12. That old serpent, that ancient dragon who deceiveth the entirety of the world. That this is where we see ourselves. This is where we find ourselves. And so I pray that we're home with the Most High in 2 days. But as I said, it's my opinion that the Antichrist has to be revealed, that peace comes sudden destruction, the beast system is put into place, and that all this has to happen before the return of Christ, the second coming. But again, I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. And so I I hope it plays out that way. I would be just overjoyed. New body, dancing in the heavens. I'm all good with that. Yeah. But anyways, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. I do hope that this show blessed your life in some manner, as far as the signs and the seasons and the signs in the heavens and the earth. That I wanted to show you how it played out over thousands of years. God bless all. Good night.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be